Maplewood was one of those towns where nothing much ever happened. It wasn't too big, but it wasn't too small either. Everyone knew everyone, and life moved at a steady pace. People went to work, kids went to school, and weekends were spent at the local diner or park. For Jordan Williams, life in Maplewood was both comforting and challenging. Comforting because he had grown up here, surrounded by familiar faces and places. Challenging because at just 16 years old he carried more responsibility than most teenagers his age. Jordan lived with his grandmother Evelyn. She was a kind woman with silver hair and warm eyes that always seemed to know what you were thinking before you said it. His parents had passed away in a car accident when he was 10, leaving him and Evelyn to pick up the pieces together. Since then, Jordan had learned to take care of himself and help out around the house. He didn't complain about it. He rarely complained about anything, but sometimes late at night, he wondered what life might have been like if things had turned out differently. On this particular afternoon, the sun was shining brightly, casting golden rays over the quiet streets of Maplewood. Jordan walked home from school, his backpack slung over one shoulder. The air smelled fresh like cut grass and blooming flowers. Birds chirped happily in the trees, and the distant hum of lawnmowers could be heard as people tended to their yards. It was peaceful, almost perfect, except for the faint sound of barking dogs somewhere in the distance. Jordan paused for a moment, listening. The barking grew louder, sharper, angrier. He glanced toward the source of the noise, a house with a tall wooden fence surrounding its backyard. There was a sign on the gate that read, "Beware of dog," in bold red letters. Jordan had seen the house before. It belonged to Mr. Peterson, an older man who kept to himself. The man owned a German shepherd named Max, a large and intimidating dog that often paced along the fence, growling at anyone who dared come close. Jordan shook his head slightly and continued walking. He wasn't worried about the dog. It was locked up behind the fence after all. But something about the situation made him uneasy. Maybe it was the way the barking seemed to echo through the otherwise calm neighborhood. Or maybe it was the fact that no one else was around. Most people were either still at work or inside their homes, enjoying the cool shade during the hottest part of the day. As Jordan approached the park at the end of the street, he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. A little girl was playing near the edge of the playground, her blonde pigtails bouncing as she chased after a colorful butterfly. She wore a pink dress and white sandals, looking every bit like a picture-perfect child from a storybook. Her laughter floated through the air, light and carefree. For a moment, Jordan smiled. Kids had a way of making even the dullest days feel brighter. But then, he realized something. The girl was dangerously close to the same house with the angry dog. Without realizing it, she had wandered right up to the fence, her small hands gripping the wooden slats as she peered curiously into the yard. Jordan's heart skipped a beat. He quickened his pace, his sneakers crunching against the gravel path. "Hey," he called out, trying to get the girl's attention. "You shouldn't be so close to that fence." The girl turned her head, startled. She looked younger than Jordan had initially thought, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Her wide blue eyes blinked up at him, confused. "Why not?" she asked innocently. "Because there's a dog back there," Jordan explained, pointing toward the fence. "And he doesn't look very friendly." Just as he finished speaking, the German shepherd appeared on the other side of the fence. It was huge, with dark fur and piercing eyes that glared menacingly at anyone who came near. The dog let out a low growl, its teeth flashing as it bared them in warning. Jordan felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't normal behavior for a dog, even one as big as Max. The girl must have sensed the danger too, because she took a hesitant step backward, but instead of retreating completely, she froze, staring at the dog with wide, frightened eyes. That's when Jordan noticed something even worse. The latch on the gate was loose. Somehow, the dog had managed to push it open just enough to squeeze through. Time seemed to slow down as Jordan watched the scene unfold. The German shepherd stepped out of the yard, its muscles tense and ready to strike. Its growls grew louder, more aggressive, as it locked eyes on the terrified girl. Jordan didn't think twice. He dropped his backpack onto the ground and rushed forward, putting himself between the dog and the child. "Stay back," Jordan shouted, raising his arms to make himself appear bigger. His voice wavered slightly, but he forced himself to sound confident. The last thing he wanted was for the dog to sense fear. The German Shepherd hesitated for a split second, its gaze shifting from the girl to Jordan. Then, with a snarl, it lunged forward. Jordan reacted instinctively, grabbing a fallen tree branch. From the ground, he swung it wildly, keeping the dog at bay while shouting for the girl to run. "Go, get out of here," he yelled, his voice hoarse with urgency. The girl stumbled backward, tears streaming down her face as she tried to obey. But she was so scared that she tripped over her own feet, falling hard onto the grass. Jordan's stomach twisted with panic. If he didn't act fast, the dog would reach her in seconds. Summoning every ounce of courage he had, Jordan stepped closer to the dog, waving the branch wildly and shouting as loud as he could. The German Shepherd snapped at him, narrowly missing his leg. Jordan's heart raced as he maneuvered the dog away from the girl, using the branch to create a barrier between them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the dog backed off, retreating to the safety of its yard. Breathing heavily, Jordan turned to check on the girl. She was sitting on the ground, sobbing uncontrollably but otherwise unharmed. Relief washed over him as he knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe now." Moments later, the girl's mother arrived, having heard her daughter's cries from inside their home. She gasped in horror when she saw the scene. The open gate, the angry dog pacing behind the fence, and her daughter trembling with fear. Tears filled her eyes as she pulled the girl into a tight embrace. "Thank you," she whispered, looking at Jordan with gratitude. "You saved her." Jordan shrugged modestly, brushing dirt off his jeans. "I just did what anyone would have done," he replied, though deep down he wasn't sure that was true. Not everyone would have risked their life to protect a stranger's child. Word of the incident spread quickly throughout Maplewood. Neighbors gathered at the park, discussing what had happened and marveling at Jordan's bravery. Animal control officers arrived shortly afterward, securing the dog and ensuring it wouldn't pose a threat to anyone else. As Jordan walked home that evening, his mind replayed the events of the afternoon. He couldn't shake the image of the dog's sharp teeth or the sound of its growl, but more than that, he remembered the look of terror on the little girl's face and the relief that followed once she realized she was safe. For the first time, in a long while, Jordan felt proud of himself. Proud not because he'd been brave, but because he'd made a difference. And as he stepped through the front door of his grandmother's house, he knew this was a day he would never forget. The days that followed felt surreal to Jordan. What had started as an ordinary walk home from school turned into something he couldn't have imagined. People talked about him everywhere, in the grocery store, at the bus stop, even in line at the coffee shop his grandmother liked to visit. Everyone seemed to know his name now, and they all wanted to say how proud they were of what he'd done. At first, Jordan tried to ignore it. He went about his routine like nothing had changed. He helped his grandmother cook dinner, finished his homework, and walked to school the same way he always did. But no matter where he went, people stopped him to shake his hand or pat him on the back. Some called him a hero. Others simply smiled and said thank you. It made him uncomfortable, though he didn't let it show. Jordan wasn't used to being the center of attention, and the praise felt strange, almost overwhelming. One day after school, Jordan found himself sitting on a bench near the park where everything had happened. The weather was cooler than usual, with a light breeze rustling the leaves overhead. He stared at the ground, lost in thought. He kept replaying the incident in his mind. The snarling dog, the frightened girl, the adrenaline coursing through his veins as he stepped between them. He wondered if he'd really been brave or if he'd just acted without thinking. Maybe anyone else would have done the same thing. "Hey," a voice interrupted his thoughts. Jordan looked up to see Rachel Harper, the mother of the little girl he'd saved, standing beside him. She held a basket filled with fresh-baked cookies, their sweet aroma drifting toward him. "Mind if I sit?" Jordan hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Sure." Rachel sat down next to him, setting the basket on the bench. "I brought these for you," she said, pushing it closer. "It's not much, but I wanted to do something to say thank you." You don't have to thank me, Jordan replied, quickly. I just did what I had to do. Rachel smiled softly, her eyes glistening with emotion. Maybe so, but that doesn't make it any less special. You saved my daughter's life, Jordan. If you hadn't been there. Her voice trailed off and she took a deep breath to steady herself. I can't even think about it. Jordan shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say. He wasn't good at accepting gratitude, especially when it came from someone who seemed so genuinely grateful. Lily's okay though, right? He asked finally. She's fine, Rachel assured him. She hasn't stopped talking about you, actually. She keeps saying, the nice boy saved me. Rachel chuckled, though her expression remained serious. But I need you to understand something, Jordan. You didn't just save her physically. You gave her hope again. Hope? Jordan repeated, confused. Rachel nodded. Lily's been through a lot lately. Her father passed away last year, and it's been hard for her to feel safe since then. Seeing someone step in like you did, it reminded her that there are still good people in the world, people who care enough to help even when it's scary. Jordan looked away, feeling a lump form in his throat. He hadn't thought about it that way. All he'd wanted was to keep the girl safe. Hearing that his actions meant so much more, too, her family made him feel both proud and humbled. Over the next few days, news of Jordan's bravery spread beyond Maplewood. Local reporters started showing up at his house, asking for interviews. Neighbors knocked on the door offering congratulations. Even strangers reached out, sending letters and messages of support. Jordan's grandmother, Evelyn, handled most of it for him. She was proud of her grandson, of course, but she also worried about how all the attention might affect him. It's important to acknowledge what you did, Jordan, she told him one evening as they sat together on the porch. But don't let it go to your head. True heroes don't seek recognition. They act because it's the right thing to do. I know, Grandma, Jordan said quietly. I'm not trying to be famous or anything. I just wish everyone would stop making such a big deal about it. Evelyn patted his knee affectionately. Sometimes we don't get to choose how other people see us. What matters is how you see yourself. Her words stayed with him long after their conversation ended. As the days turned into weeks, Jordan began to notice subtle changes in the way people treated him. Teachers greeted him warmly in the hallways. Students who barely spoke to him before suddenly wanted to be friends. Even Mr. Peterson, the owner of the German Shepherd, approached him one afternoon to apologize for the dog's behavior and express his gratitude. Despite the positive reactions, not everyone responded kindly. Some kids at school whispered behind his back, accusing him of seeking attention or exaggerating the danger to gain fame. Jordan heard the rumors but chose to ignore them. He knew the truth, and that was all that mattered. Meanwhile, the media coverage continued to grow. News outlets across the country picked up Jordan's story, turning him into a symbol of courage and selflessness. Articles praised him as a role model for young people, particularly those from underrepresented communities. Social media exploded, with posts celebrating his actions using hashtags like Takinner Real Life Hero and Your Courage in Action. Celebrities shared videos expressing admiration for his bravery, and organizations invited him to speak at events honoring everyday heroes. Through it all, Jordan remained grounded. He attended a few interviews at his grandmother's insistence, speaking honestly about what had happened and why he'd acted the way he did. When asked how he felt about becoming a national figure, he shrugged and said, "I'm just glad the girl is okay. That's all that matters." His humility only added to his appeal, drawing even more support from people who admired his character as much as his actions. Letters poured in from families thanking him for inspiring their children. Parents wrote about how they used his story to teach their kids about kindness and bravery. One letter, written by a young boy named Ethan, stood out to Jordan. It read, "Dear Jordan, thank you for being so brave. My mom says you're a hero because you helped someone even though it was scary. I want to be like you when I grow up. Can you tell me how you were so brave?" Reading those words filled Jordan with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt before. For the first time, he realized that his actions weren't just about saving a girl from a dangerous dog. They were about showing others that anyone could make a difference no matter who they were or where they came from. As the weeks passed, life in Maplewood slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be with Jordan's story dominating headlines. The town council organized a ceremony to honor him, presenting him with a certificate of bravery and planting a tree in the park as a permanent reminder of his heroism. Dozens of residents attended, including Lily and her mother, who gave heartfelt speeches thanking Jordan for his courage. Standing on the stage, surrounded by cheering neighbors and flashing cameras, Jordan felt a mix of emotions. Part of him wished he could disappear into the crowd and forget the whole thing ever happened. Another part of him understood the importance of what he represented, not just to Maplewood, but to people everywhere. When the ceremony ended, Jordan slipped away quietly, heading back to the park where it all began. He sat beneath the newly planted tree, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to reflect on everything that had transpired. He thought about the dog, the girl, and the countless strangers who had reached out to share their stories. He thought about his grandmother's advice and the lessons he'd learned along the way. Most of all, he thought about how one moment of courage could ripple outward, touching lives in ways he never expected. And as he sat there, listening to the gentle rustle of leaves above him, Jordan realized something important. Being a hero wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about doing the right thing even when it was hard. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Life in Maplewood had changed in ways Jordan never imagined. The attention hadn't faded completely, but it had settled into something quieter, more manageable. People still smiled when they saw him, and some even stopped to chat. But the constant spotlight felt less intense now. Jordan appreciated the shift. It gave him room to breathe, to think about everything that had happened without feeling like he was under a microscope. One evening, after finishing his homework, Jordan decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. It was one of those perfect spring nights where the air smelled fresh and cool, and the stars twinkled brightly overhead. He wandered aimlessly, letting his feet guide him until he found himself back at the park. The newly planted tree stood proudly near the playground, its leaves rustling softly in the breeze. Jordan sat down on a nearby bench, leaning back to stare at the sky. He thought about how strange life could be sometimes. Just a few months ago, he'd been an ordinary teenager, trying to get through school and help his grandmother around the house. Now he was someone people looked up to, a symbol of bravery and kindness. It was hard to wrap his head around, especially since he didn't feel any different than before. Inside, he was still the same Jordan, quiet, thoughtful, and a little unsure of himself. As he sat there lost in thought, he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. A figure approached slowly, hesitating before sitting down beside him. It was Lily Harper, the little girl he'd saved. She clutched a stuffed rabbit tightly in her arms, her blonde pigtails swaying slightly as she turned to look at him. "Hi," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jordan smiled, surprised to see her. "Hey, Lily. What are you doing out here so late?" She shrugged, fidgeting with the edge of her sweater. "I wanted to see the tree." "The tree?" Jordan asked, glancing at the young sapling beside them. Lily nodded. "Mom told me it's for you, to say thank you." Jordan felt a lump rise in his throat. He hadn't realized the town council had dedicated the tree specifically to him. Sure, they'd mentioned planting it during the ceremony, but he'd assumed it was meant to honor everyone involved. The girl, the dog, the whole situation. Knowing it was just for him made him feel both proud and uneasy. "It's nice," he said, finally breaking the silence. "Do you come here often?" "Sometimes," Lily admitted, her cheeks turning pink. "I like it here. It feels safe." Jordan nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The park had always been a peaceful place, even before everything that happened. But now it carried a deeper meaning, for both of them. They sat together, quietly for a while, listening to the sounds of the night. Crickets chirped in the distance, and the occasional bark of a dog echoed faintly from somewhere nearby. Finally, Lily spoke again, her voice trembling slightly. I dreamed about the dog last night, she confessed. It scared me. Jordan's heart sank. He hadn't considered how much the incident might have affected her. Kids were resilient, but facing something like that could leave scars. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You don't have to be afraid anymore, Lily, he said gently. The dog can't hurt you, and even if something scary happens, remember, you're not alone. There are people who care about you and will protect you. Lily looked at him, her wide blue eyes searching his face. Like you? Yeah, Jordan replied with a small smile. Like me. Her expression softened, and she hugged her stuffed rabbit closer. Thank you, she whispered, for saving me. Jordan didn't know what to say. No words seemed big enough to capture the weight of her gratitude, or his own feelings about the situation. Instead, he simply nodded, hoping she understood how much her words meant to him. After a few more minutes, Lily stood up, brushing off her jeans. I should go home, she said. Mom says I'm not supposed to stay out too late. Okay, Jordan agreed, standing as well. Tell your Mom I said hi. Lily grinned and waved goodbye before skipping off toward her house. Watching her go, Jordan felt a pang of sadness mixed with hope. She was healing, slowly but surely, and that gave him comfort. Maybe his actions really had made a difference, not just for her but for others too. Over the next few weeks, Jordan began to notice other changes in the town. Conversations sparked by his story led to discussions about public safety and responsible pet ownership. Local officials organized workshops to educate residents on how to prevent similar incidents in the future. Signs reminding people to secure their pets appeared throughout the neighborhood, and stricter regulations were put in place to ensure compliance. Jordan was invited to speak at one of these events, which made him nervous. Public speaking wasn't something he enjoyed, but he agreed to participate because he believed in the cause. Standing in front of a crowd of neighbors and strangers, he shared his experience honestly, emphasizing the importance of looking out for one another. When I saw that dog, he began, his voice steady despite his nerves, I didn't stop to think about whether I should step in. I just knew it was the right thing to do. We all have moments like that, chances to make a difference no matter how small. Sometimes being brave isn't about doing something huge. It's about stepping up when someone needs help. His speech earned applause, but more importantly, it inspired action. People started paying closer attention to their surroundings, keeping an eye out for potential dangers. Neighbors checked in on each other more often, fostering a stronger sense of community. Even kids at school began treating Jordan differently, not just as a hero, but as a friend. Despite the positive changes, not everything was easy. Some online trolls continued to criticize Jordan, accusing him of exaggerating the danger or seeking attention. These comments stung, but Jordan refused to let them affect him. His grandmother reminded him that negativity came with fame, and the best way to combat it was to stay true to himself. You've already proven who you are, Jordan, Evelyn said one evening over dinner. Those people don't define you. Your actions do. Her words resonated deeply with him. As time passed, Jordan learned to focus on the good his story had brought rather than the bad. Letters and messages from grateful strangers poured in, daily sharing stories of how his bravery had inspired them to act selflessly in their own lives. Parents wrote about teaching their children the value of courage and kindness. Teachers described using his example to encourage students to stand up for what was right. One letter, in particular, stood out. It came from a woman named Maria, who lived in another state. Her son Alex had been bullied at school for years. After reading about Jordan's story, Alex decided to confront his bullies, not with anger, but with understanding. He reached out to them, offering friendship instead of retaliation. According to Maria, Alex credited Jordan's example for giving him the courage to try. Reading that letter filled Jordan with a profound sense of purpose. He realized that his actions weren't just about saving a girl from a dog attack. They were about showing others that anyone could make a difference regardless of age, race, or background. Every kind gesture, no matter how small, had the power to create ripples far beyond what anyone could predict. As spring turned into summer, Life in Maplewood continued to evolve. The park became a gathering place once again, filled with laughter and joy. Families picnicked beneath the shade of trees. Children played on the swings and dogs romped happily on leashes. Jordan visited often, finding solace in the simple beauty of everyday life. One afternoon, while sitting on the same bench where he'd spoken with Lily, Jordan noticed a group of kids playing nearby. They were building a fort out of sticks and leaves, laughing and shouting excitedly. One boy, slightly older than the rest, caught Jordan's eye. He was helping the younger ones carry logs and branches, ensuring everyone had a part to play. Watching them, Jordan smiled. These kids were growing up in a world shaped, at least in part, by his actions. They were learning the importance of teamwork, kindness, and bravery. And though he might never meet most of them, he knew his story would continue to inspire generations to come. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park. Jordan stood up, stretching his arms above his head. He glanced one last time at the tree planted in his honor, its leaves shimmering gold in the fading light. Then, with a deep breath, he turned and walked away, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Jordan never imagined he'd be standing where he was now, at the center of a community event, speaking to a crowd of people who hung on his every word. It wasn't something he'd ever dreamed of doing, let alone enjoyed. But here he was, gripping the sides of the podium tightly as he tried to steady his nerves. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind. True heroes don't seek recognition. They act because it's the right thing to do. Those words gave him strength, reminding him why he had agreed to speak in the first place. The event was called Community Safety Day, organized by local officials to address issues like responsible pet ownership and neighborhood watch programs. Jordan had been invited to share his story and encourage others to look out for one another. At first, he'd hesitated, unsure if he had anything meaningful to say. But after seeing how much his actions had inspired people, he decided it was worth trying. As he looked out at the crowd, he saw familiar faces, his grandmother sitting proudly in the front row, Lily and her mother smiling warmly, and even some of his classmates who had once teased him but now seemed genuinely interested in what he had to say. There were also strangers, families with young kids, elderly couples holding hands, and volunteers wearing bright vests emblazoned with the event logo. The atmosphere was lively yet peaceful, with laughter and chatter blending with the distant sound of children playing. Jordan cleared his throat and began to speak. "Hi, everyone," he started, his voice a little shaky at first. "I'm Jordan Williams, and I'm not really used to talking in front of big groups like this. But I wanted to share my story because I think it's important." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "A few months ago, I was just walking home from school when I noticed a little girl playing near a fence. There was a dog inside the yard, and it didn't seem happy. Before I knew it, the dog got loose, and I had to step in to protect her." The crowd listened intently, their eyes fixed on Jordan as he recounted the incident. He described how scared he'd been, how the dog had growled and snapped at him, and how he'd used a tree branch to keep it away until help arrived. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He wanted people to understand that bravery wasn't about being fearless. It was about acting despite fear. "When I saw that dog coming toward the girl, I didn't stop to think about whether I should get involved," Jordan explained. "I just knew it was the right thing to do. And honestly, I think we all have moments like that, chances to make a difference no matter how small. Sometimes being brave isn't about doing something huge. It's about stepping up when someone needs help." His words resonated deeply with the audience. People nodded along, some wiping away tears while others clapped softly in agreement. Jordan felt a surge of confidence as he realized his message was reaching them. He went on to talk about the importance of looking out for one another, not just in dangerous situations but in everyday life too. "We live in a world where it's easy to feel disconnected," he said, his voice growing stronger. "But we're all part of the same community. If we take care of each other, even in small ways, we can create a safer, kinder place for everyone." When he finished speaking, the crowd erupted into applause. Jordan stepped back from the podium, feeling a mix of relief and pride. He hadn't expected such a warm response, but it reinforced the idea that his story mattered, not just to him, but to the entire town. After the event, people lined up to thank Jordan personally. Parents told him how they planned to teach their kids about courage using his example. Teachers shared stories of students who had already started standing up for others. Even Mr. Peterson, the owner of the German Shepherd, approached him with a heartfelt apology and gratitude. "I'm so sorry about what happened," Mr. Peterson said, shaking Jordan's hand firmly. "Max has always been protective, but I should have made sure he couldn't escape. Thank you for keeping everyone safe." Jordan smiled, accepting the apology graciously. "It's okay. Accidents happen. What matters is that we learn from them." As the day wore on, Jordan found himself reflecting on how far he'd come since that fateful afternoon in the park. Back then, he'd simply acted on instinct, driven by a desire to protect someone in need. Now, he was inspiring others to do the same. It was humbling and a little overwhelming, but he couldn't deny the sense of purpose it gave him. Later that evening, Jordan returned home to find his grandmother waiting for him on the porch. She greeted him with a proud smile, her arms crossed over her chest. "Well?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "How did it go?" Jordan chuckled, sinking into the chair beside her. "It went okay, I guess. People seemed to like it." "Liked it?" Evelyn repeated, laughing softly. "From what I heard, they loved it. You're becoming quite the role model around here." Jordan shrugged modestly, staring out at the darkening sky. "I don't know about that. I want people to know that anyone can be brave. You don't have to be special or famous to make a difference." Evelyn reached over, patting his knee affectionately. "That's exactly why you are special, Jordan. You remind people of what truly matters, the goodness inside all of us." Her words stayed with him long after their conversation ended. As he lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, Jordan thought about the impact his story had on others. He thought about Lily, who was slowly regaining her confidence, about Maria and her son Alex, who had learned to face bullying with kindness, about the countless strangers who had written to thank him for inspiring them to act selflessly. For the first time, Jordan allowed himself to fully embrace the idea that his actions had meaning, not just for those directly involved, but for the broader community. By stepping up when it mattered most, he had sparked a chain reaction of positivity and change. It wasn't fame or recognition that mattered. It was the knowledge that he had made a difference. Over the next few weeks, Jordan continued to attend events and participate in discussions about safety and kindness. He visited schools, sharing his story with students and encouraging them to stand up for one another. He joined local initiatives aimed at strengthening neighborhood bonds, volunteering his time to help wherever he could. Each experience brought new challenges but also new opportunities to grow and connect with others. One day, while helping clean up the park alongside other volunteers, Jordan noticed a mural being painted on the side of a nearby building. Curious, he wandered over to take a closer look. The artist, a middle-aged woman named Sarah, greeted him warmly. "This one's for you," she said, gesturing to the half-finished artwork. "The town council commissioned it to honor your bravery." Jordan's jaw dropped as he studied the painting. It depicted him standing protectively in front of Lily, his arm outstretched as he shielded her from the snarling dog. The colors were vibrant, capturing the tension and emotion of the moment perfectly. Surrounding the central image were smaller scenes showing people helping each other, neighbors sharing meals, kids playing together, and families supporting one another. "It's beautiful," Jordan murmured, overwhelmed by the gesture. "But I didn't do all this by myself. Everyone played a part." Sarah nodded knowingly. "Exactly. That's why we included the other images, to show how your actions inspired others to follow your lead. You lit a spark, Jordan. Now it's up to all of us to keep it burning." Her explanation touched him deeply. For so long, he had struggled to accept the praise and attention that came with being labeled a hero. But now, he understood that it wasn't about him. It was about the ripple effect his actions had created. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, contributed to a larger movement toward compassion and unity. As the mural neared completion, Jordan spent more time in the park, watching as people stopped to admire it. Some took photos, while others simply stood there lost in thought. One afternoon, he spotted Lily and her mother walking hand in hand toward the artwork. Lily's eyes widened as she gazed up at the painting, her expression a mixture of awe and pride. "Is that really me?" she asked, pointing to the figure of the little girl in the pink dress. Jordan knelt down beside her, smiling. "Yeah, that's you. And that's me, making sure you're safe." Lily grinned, hugging him tightly. "Thank you again, Jordan. I'll never forget what you did." Her words brought tears to his eyes, though he blinked them away quickly. In that moment, Jordan realized that his journey wasn't just about saving a girl from a dog attack. It was about creating a legacy of hope and courage that would endure long after he was gone. As the sun set over Maplewood, casting golden rays across the park, Jordan stood beneath the mural, surrounded by friends, family, and neighbors. He felt a profound sense of belonging, knowing that he was part of something bigger than himself. And as he looked out at the faces of the people he had inspired, he knew one thing for certain. Bravery wasn't about being fearless. It was about choosing to act with love, even when it was hard. The mural quickly became a landmark in Maplewood. People came from all over town to see it, and soon, visitors from neighboring cities began stopping by too. It wasn't just a piece of art. It was a symbol of hope, courage, and community spirit. For Jordan, seeing his story immortalized on such a grand scale was both humbling and overwhelming. He hadn't asked for any of this attention, but he couldn't deny the positive impact it was having on those around him. Every day after school, Jordan found himself drawn to the park where the mural stood. Sometimes he'd sit on a nearby bench, watching as people gathered to admire the artwork. Families posed for photos in front of it, kids pointed excitedly at the figures painted on the wall, and older residents shared stories about how the town had changed since the incident. Jordan listened quietly, feeling a mix of pride and gratitude. One afternoon, as Jordan sat beneath the shade of a tree, he noticed a group of teenagers walking toward the mural. They were students from his school, kids who usually kept to themselves, or hung out in cliques. Jordan recognized a few of them from the hallways, though they had never spoken directly to him before. To his surprise, they approached him, their expressions curious but respectful. "Hey, Jordan," one of them said, a tall boy named Marcus. "Is that really you in the mural?" Jordan nodded, feeling a bit awkward under their gaze. "Yeah, it is." "That's pretty cool," Marcus replied, glancing back at the painting. "I mean, not everyone gets their own mural." Another student, a girl named Tia, chimed in. "We heard about what you did, saving that girl from the dog. That's insane. You're like a real-life superhero." Jordan laughed nervously, scratching the back of his neck. "I'm no superhero, I just did what anyone would have done." "But not everyone does," Tia countered, her tone serious. "Most people would have frozen or run away. You didn't. That takes guts." Her words struck a chord with Jordan. He had spent so much time downplaying his actions, trying to avoid the spotlight, that he hadn't fully acknowledged the significance of what he'd done. Hearing someone else put it into perspective made him realize just how rare moments of true bravery could be. The group stayed for a while, asking questions and sharing their thoughts. Some admitted they admired Jordan for stepping up when it mattered most. Others confessed they wished they could be more like him, more willing to help others even when it was scary. By the time they left, Jordan felt a renewed sense of purpose. If his story could inspire even a handful of people to act with kindness and courage, then maybe all the attention was worth it. As the days passed, Jordan noticed subtle changes in the way his peers treated him. Kids who had once teased him now greeted him warmly in the hallways. Teachers praised him openly during class, using his example to teach lessons about empathy and leadership. Even the school principal invited him to speak at an assembly, encouraging students to follow in his footsteps. At first, Jordan hesitated. Public speaking still made him nervous, and he worried about coming across as boastful or preachy. But his grandmother reminded him of something important. You don't have to have all the answers, Jordan. Just share your truth. That's enough. Taking her advice to heart, Jordan agreed to give the speech. On the day of the assembly, the auditorium buzzed with excitement as students filed in, eager to hear what he had to say. When Jordan stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. He took a deep breath, gripping the sides of the podium to steady his nerves. "I'm not here to tell you how to live your lives," he began, his voice soft but steady. "I'm just here to share my story and maybe give you something to think about." He went on to describe the day he saved Lily, emphasizing the fear he'd felt and the uncertainty of whether he'd made the right choice. "I didn't stop to think about whether I should step in," he explained. "I just knew it was the right thing to do. And honestly, I think we all have chances like that, moments where we can make a difference no matter how small." Jordan paused, scanning the room. Hundreds of eyes stared back at him, wide with curiosity. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you act anyway, even when you're terrified. It means standing up for someone who needs help, even if it's hard. And it doesn't have to be something big. Sometimes it's as simple as sitting with someone who's lonely or sticking up for someone who's being bullied. When he finished speaking, the room erupted into applause. Students cheered, some standing to show their appreciation. Jordan stepped back from the podium, his heart pounding with a mix of relief and pride. He hadn't expected such a warm response, but it reinforced the idea that his message resonated deeply with others. In the weeks that followed, Jordan saw evidence of his influence everywhere. Kids at school started forming new friendships, reaching out to classmates they might have ignored before. Teachers reported fewer incidents of bullying, crediting Jordan's speech for inspiring students to treat each other with more kindness. Even outside of school, the effects were noticeable. Neighbors checked in on one another more often, and local businesses organized charity drives to support struggling families. Despite the overwhelmingly positive reactions, not everything was easy. Anonymous trolls continued to criticize Jordan, online accusing him of exaggerating the danger or seeking fame. These comments hurt, but Jordan refused to let them define him. His grandmother reminded him that negativity came with visibility, and the best way to combat it was to stay true to himself. "You've already proven who you are, Jordan," Evelyn said one evening over dinner. "Those people don't define you. Your actions do." Her words gave him strength. As time passed, Jordan learned to focus on the good his story had brought rather than the bad. Letters and messages from grateful strangers poured in daily, sharing stories of how his bravery had inspired them to act selflessly in their own lives. Parents wrote about teaching their children the value of courage and kindness. Teachers described using his example to encourage students to stand up for what was right. One letter in particular stood out. It came from a man named Daniel, who lived in a nearby city. His teenage son Ethan had been struggling with anxiety and low self-esteem. After hearing Jordan's story, Ethan decided to volunteer at a local animal shelter, channeling his fears into helping others. According to Daniel, Ethan credited Jordan's example for giving him the courage to try. Reading that letter filled Jordan with a profound sense of purpose. He realized that his actions weren't just about saving a girl from a dog attack, they were about showing others that anyone could make a difference regardless of age, race, or background. Every kind gesture, no matter how small, had the power to create ripples far beyond what anyone could predict. As summer approached, life in Maplewood continued to evolve. The park remained a gathering place, filled with laughter and joy. Families picnicked beneath the shade of trees, children played on the swings, and dogs romped happily on leashes. Jordan visited often, finding solace in the simple beauty of everyday life. One afternoon, while sitting on the same bench where he'd spoken with Lily months earlier, Jordan noticed a group of kids playing nearby. They were building a fort out of sticks and leaves, laughing and shouting excitedly. One boy, slightly older than the rest, caught Jordan's eye. He was helping the younger ones carry logs and branches, ensuring everyone had a part to play. Watching them, Jordan smiled. These kids were growing up in a world shaped, at least in part, by his actions. They were learning the importance of teamwork, kindness, and bravery. and though he might never meet most of them, he knew his story would continue to inspire generations to come. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park. Jordan stood up, stretching his arms above his head. He glanced one last time at the mural, its vibrant colors shimmering in the fading light. Then, with a deep breath, he turned and walked away, ready to face whatever lay ahead. As summer settled over Maplewood, Jordan felt a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in months. The whirlwind of attention had slowed down, replaced by a quieter, more meaningful rhythm. People still smiled when they saw him, but the constant spotlight had faded into something gentler. Life was returning to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after everything that had happened. Jordan spent most of his free time at the park, sitting near the mural or watching kids play. It became a kind of sanctuary for him, a place where he could reflect on how far he'd come since that fateful afternoon. He often thought about the chain reaction his actions had set off, not just in Maplewood, but beyond. Strangers continued to write letters, sharing stories of how his bravery had inspired them to make changes in their own lives. Parents told him their children now stood up for classmates being bullied. Teachers said students were treating each other with more kindness and respect. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Jordan sat on his usual bench, staring at the mural. The colors glowed softly in the fading light, almost magical against the backdrop of the park. He traced the painted figures with his eyes, the protective stance he'd taken, the frightened girl behind him, the snarling dog frozen mid-growl. It was strange to see his story immortalized like this, captured in vivid detail for everyone to see. Lily and her mother approached quietly, sitting beside him without saying a word. Lily held a small bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked earlier, clutching them tightly in her hands. She looked up at Jordan, her wide blue eyes filled with gratitude. "We brought these for you," she said shyly, holding out the flowers. Jordan smiled, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Lily. They're beautiful." Rachel, Lily's mother, leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "We wanted to say thank you again for everything. Not just for saving Lily, but for reminding us all what it means to be brave." Jordan shook his head modestly. "I didn't do anything special, I just acted." "That's exactly why it's special," Rachel replied gently. "You didn't hesitate. You didn't think about yourself. You just did what needed to be done. And that's something we can all learn from." Her words lingered in the air, settling over Jordan like a warm blanket. He realized that his story wasn't just about one moment of courage. It was about inspiring others to find their own moments of bravery. Whether it was standing up for someone in need, lending a hand to a neighbor, or simply choosing kindness over indifference, every action mattered. As the weeks passed, Jordan noticed even more changes in the town. The mural had sparked conversations about unity and compassion, leading to new initiatives aimed at strengthening community bonds. Neighbors organized potluck dinners, inviting people they barely knew to share food and stories. Kids started forming clubs focused on volunteering and helping others. Even the local library hosted workshops teaching skills like conflict resolution and empathy. Jordan participated in many of these efforts, finding joy in connecting with others. He helped organize a cleanup day at the park, joined a mentorship program for younger students, and volunteered at the animal shelter where Daniel's son Ethan now worked. Each experience reinforced the idea that small acts of kindness could create big waves of change. One Saturday morning, Jordan arrived at the park early to help plant flowers around the base of the tree dedicated to him. A group of volunteers had gathered, including some of his classmates, teachers, and neighbors. As they dug holes and placed colorful blooms into the soil, laughter and chatter filled the air. "This is nice," Tia said, brushing dirt off her hands. "Feels good to do something for the community." "It does," Jordan agreed, smiling, as he patted soil around a bright yellow daffodil. "And it's not just about making things look pretty. It's about showing we care." By the time they finished, the area around the tree looked vibrant and welcoming. Jordan stepped back to admire their work, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. This was his legacy, not just the mural or the speeches, but the way his actions had inspired others to come together and make a difference. Later that day, Jordan returned home to find his grandmother waiting for him on the porch. She greeted him with a proud smile, her arms crossed over her chest. "Well?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "How did it go?" Jordan chuckled, sinking into the chair beside her. "It went great. Everyone pitched in and the tree looks amazing now." Evelyn nodded approvingly. "That's what happens when people care about each other. Little by little, we build something stronger." Her words stayed with him long after their conversation ended. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Jordan reflected on everything that had happened. From the moment he'd stepped between the dog and the girl to the present day, his life had changed in ways he never could have imagined. But through it all, one thing remained clear. Courage wasn't about seeking recognition or fame. It was about doing the right thing, even when it was hard. The next morning, Jordan woke up early and headed to the park once more. He walked slowly, taking in the sights and sounds around him. Families played on the swings, dogs chased balls, and laughter echoed through the trees. As he approached the mural, he paused, studying it one last time. For so long he had struggled to accept the praise and attention that came with being labeled a hero. But now, he understood that it wasn't about him. It was about the ripple effect his actions had created. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, contributed to a larger movement toward compassion and unity. With a final glance at the painting, Jordan turned and began walking away. He didn't look back this time, knowing that his story would live on, not just in the mural but in the hearts of those it had touched. As he strolled through the park, he felt a profound sense of peace knowing that he had made a difference. Maplewood may have moved on to other news stories, but Jordan's bravery left a lasting impact. It proved that even in a world full of challenges, one person's courage could shine brightly enough to change everything, for themselves, for others, and for generations to come.